Nice to see you.
Yes.
Real talk.
Yeah.
The first item on the agenda is
Hi, how's Sarah?
opportunity for public comment. Does anybody have anything in general that they would like to say to us?
May I?
Yes, go ahead. Could you just identify yourself?
Sure. Richard Scher, 11 Silver Hill Road. As I understand, the purpose of the meeting today is to discuss the, among other things, the zoning amendment for the new library. May I please come to the only board in this town where I know enough of the people involved to have some confidence in their ability to write this incredibly broken process. For the last 12 years, we have tried to figure out what to do with these buildings, and we have stressed among all things that the process be in place, that the process be in place before the idea. That, as someone who has been in the idea business for 42 years, that is the craziest thing I have ever heard. It does more to destroy any chance we have of figuring out what to do, the best use for those buildings. If you sit and have an amendment and take it to town meeting, if you take a zoning bylaw amendment to town meeting, okay, fine. That's good for one purpose and one purpose only. Then Richard Scher comes to you 3 weeks or 2 weeks after you decide to do this and say, you know what we should do with that? It should be the New England Media Archive, the library for the 21st century, complete with gift shop, complete with everything else, complete with a restaurant, and all of a sudden everybody likes it. And what did you do? You just zoned it residential. You cannot do this, and I'm hoping that if I can convince this board to start the process by saying, no, we are not going to, we've already done the hard work, okay? If we decide that we want the zoning amendment to look like this, we've already written it. There's no reason to do anything more with it until the idea is in place. And I plead with everybody in this room, I plead with everybody on this board especially, to write the process, to say, forget about the process. The process is not important. What is important is the idea. What is important is getting people in the town behind the idea. The process will take care of itself. And if you boggle it up with requests for, stupid requests for proposals and zoning ordinances and everything else that automatically eliminate 70 to 80% of all the ideas that could possibly work in that venue, you've defeated yourself. Please don't do that. Please.
Okay. I just want to be clear what it is you're saying, Richard. Are you saying that what we're trying to do with the bylaw change is actually expand the number of possible uses in the buildings?
Fine, but don't do it now. In other words, because wait for the idea. What if the idea doesn't fit what you are doing? Okay? You've tried to expand it, you've gone 32 different ways, and then the perfect idea comes in, and now we got to go back to town meeting and get another 2/3 vote through. After they've already gone through a 2/3 vote. You're going to start making people angry. You don't need to do that. And if this is the one board that I thought that I could come to, that you're going to see the reason of this. You're going to see that when you start, coming up with a good idea is like pouring water through a funnel. If you have the widest part of the funnel being the acceptance part and the narrowest part in the bottle, you'll get water in the bottle. But if you turn that upside down and make everything, have to go through this very narrow little channel to get in, I guarantee you're going to have a mess all over the place. And that is what we have had for 12 years. Don't do it. Table it. There is no reason to do it. Concentrate for the next 6 months, whatever, I don't care. I don't care if it takes 6 years. It's a 300-year-old town. For the next thing you should do is to work on the idea. When you get the idea, everything else will take care of itself.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. Yes, Mario, you said you...
My comment was, is there any way we could talk about the site work part of the proposal B before we talk about the storage?
You just want to see the World Series.
Well, last time he said me 2 hours. He said 2 hours of the historic.
We're very patient tonight. They could be playing the final game.
That was my
So
request.
you could be out of here, and the rest of us would be sitting here wondering what the score is. We can talk about that when we actually open the hearing.
Okay.
Anybody else have any comments? All right. In that case, we can open the public hearing. And my other planning board members, do you all have any difficulty with putting the second part first and dealing with the HSPD second?
I'll have to suppress my jealousy, but
Yeah.
I probably can do it.
Okay. Okay, so I think the board is amenable to doing that, to reversing the order. I'd like to say a few things before we start. The
Is
preface.
that a violation of public meeting law?
No.
Because people may not have appeared based on the schedule.
The agenda says it can be done in this order.
It just
Yeah.
is one.
Yeah,
it's
Your own announcement, the announcement says it can, the order can be shifted.
I think we're okay on that, Michael. A couple of things. The first thing is, none of us on the planet, we're all in the same boat in that at the last meeting, we talked about a number of changes, and there were some suggestions, and there was an idea that the language of these amendments would probably be modified to reflect the discussion. Nobody in this room, I think, at least the planning board, have seen any of the changes. So we're in the same boat that you are. We don't know what is in these documents right now. So we'll have to walk through them with you. We have no advance knowledge of what changes were made. I don't even know who made them.
Well, on the, I'm sorry, on the shorter one, I did.
On which one?
The land disturbance, let's call it that one. not the
That's
HSP.
you made the changes on the land disturbance.
Right.
Who made the changes on HSPD?
And I made the changes, and then we talked at about 3:30 today to go over the changes, and Joel had additional comments that are reflected in the draft that you have there.
Could I, for the record, ask that we please not have a repeat of that, where those of us on the board have no idea ahead of the meeting what it is we're going to actually be discussing. I think that's a reasonable request, and I think it just increases our workload and unnecessarily. So I would just like to make that request. I don't know where the foul-up was there, for the reason why the changes weren't made and distributed earlier, but I don't want to see that happen, especially here, where this is the last hearing scheduled, I believe, for HSPD and the other bylaw. So it better be right.
Excuse me, when was that submitted today? At what time?
Right now, as far as the planning board's concerned.
On that last point, I take your point, but it was my understanding that you might also have a last look at it at your meeting next week.
I think
Obviously you've got other things as well.
there might be some tinkering, but this is the last scheduled hearing for these two articles. The next week's hearing is scheduled for the definition, review of the definitions.
Right, but just to be clear, this one can be continued to next week.
Well, we may
If
have to
need
do
be.
that.
Right.
It was something that I would have hoped that we wouldn't have to do, but we may have to. We'll
I
have
think-
to just get into it and see.
What you'll find is, particularly in the HSPD, all you're going to see there is a codification, if you will, of the comments made at the last meeting and agreed to by the planning board, and others are flagged as, where the planning board said, well, we'll consider it. So, and then in the land disturbance bylaw, it's, the heart of it is the same, but there's a new preamble. I said I would prepare a preamble to try to address some of the general comments that were made. So I think the changes will be clear as we go through.
I hope so. I really hope so. Having said that, just a couple of ground rules on the discussion. If we could actually try and hold the discussion to, at least of this first bylaw, to 30 minutes, what I would like to do is open the floor to any comments that people would care to make about what it is that they're looking at tonight. But it would be great if we could actually try to, if people have concerns, to try not to repeat the same concerns over and over again. If we could just enumerate the concerns, if somebody has said something that you agree with, then your concern is registered. But if you have something new to add, then we would be glad to hear it. So, having established that ground rule, I'll just open the conversation to anyone who would like to make a comment. And if you could, when you start, just identify yourself, that would be great. Anyone want to comment on this? Well, does everybody have a copy of this? Yeah, there are copies on that table if you've done it.
Which one again?
Article B.
Article B.
I have a question on a point of procedure. Is Elizabeth Monroe's proposal from last meeting is up there. Is that too under active consideration tonight, or is that what is the status of that?
Well, we're right now. I think this is for reference. Right now, what we're considering is on this piece of paper.
Which is what
Article
you
B.
put out before Elizabeth put her thing out.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. Well, yes,
Okay,
but the
thank you.
modifications that are on the sheet of paper.
With a preamble.
Can we read this?
Yes.
And just to
You can
clarify,
read along right with us.
No, but I mean, can we read it out loud so that we don't have to, I think it will be easier, we'll be all on the same page.
So this is an amendment proposed by you, by the planning board, not by an individual who just happened to step up and say this is how it should be written.
That's right.
Thank you.
and just to clarify on the handout in front of you, there's the double underline is the language town council added today. The single underline is what was originally prepared.
Thanks, Joe.
And the very first paragraph that has an I in front of it, it's not a one, it's an I before general use provisions. That's language that's in the zoning bylaw today. And then this would add a new subparagraph 6 under this section, numeral 5I.
All right. So we've had a request to have this read aloud, and actually, I'd like to. I'll appoint David as the volunteer to read it aloud.
Who told you I could read?
Well, this is your text.
Proposed 2013 fall STM amendment. Article B, amend Section V.I, is that correct? Zoning bylaw. To amend Section V.I, the zoning bylaw of the town of Weston by adopting a new subsection 6 as follows. General use provisions in all districts, notwithstanding anything to the contrary in Section 5 of the zoning bylaw, and in addition to other regulations set forth elsewhere in Section 5, the following general use regulations apply in all districts. 6. The intent of this section is to prevent unnecessary and avoidable alteration to vegetation, landscape, and topography, and to existing drainage patterns. This section is not intended to interfere with creative use of land, nor to interfere with routine property maintenance or the use of land for activities customarily accessory to residential uses. No site alteration or development work, including but not limited to removal of vegetation, excavation, stockpiling of fill, or grading, shall be performed on an undeveloped or vacant lot prior to planning board approval of a subdivision plan or site plan thereof. So it's supposed to be thereof?
Therefore is correct.
Therefore.
Or that.
In accordance with Section 11 of this bylaw, or if site plan / subdivision approval is not required prior to receipt of a building or demolition permit for the primary structure on the lot. This limitation shall also apply to lots with existing structures when it will be proposed to demolish or replace all or a substantial portion of the existing dwelling, or to relocate an existing dwelling to a different location on the lot. In the event that site alteration or development occurs without a building permit, site plan approval, subdivision approval, or other appropriate approval, the property owner and/or agents may be required to restore the property to its prior condition. Period.
All right, so now I think we're ready for comments. Anyone want to start? Yes.
Michael Harity, you want address?
Yes, well,
695 Boston Post Road. As I mentioned at the last hearing on this, I know a lot of people are concerned about what happens in their neighbor's property in anticipation of new development and loss of trees and change in the landscape and such. So I understand the intent, but I'm worried about how we define this and how we administer it, because this is, the preamble says this section is not intended to interfere with creative use of land. What does that mean? In some people's idea, creative use is the elimination of all vegetation. I don't really know what it means. And then it says, prior to the approval, either issuance of a permit or site plan approval, how long is prior? I mean, can someone cut down all the trees and then wait 4 years? Is that, or 2 years, or 2 months? I don't know. And so I'm worried that the building inspector has to interpret this, and that it's not for just a building permit, and then it's may not be clear when it was done, what prior means, and what one person thinks of as creative. So that's all, and that's my overall. I mean, I understand the intent, and I also would add, I'm assuming customary accessory to residential uses includes septic, and I don't know why we don't want to mention that specifically.
okay. So if I just to characterize what you're saying, you think that we should clarify the rules better so that we understand some of the more general statements in the bylaw, and that includes what uses would be considered customary to residential use, such as septic systems.
Yeah,
And
what prior
is that
means.
fair?
Yes, and the time frame that prior means.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the rules.
Yes. You're right, yes. Good, thank you for that.
Yes.
Anna Bay from 11 Delbrook Road. I think what bothers me here is the unavoidable interaction that people will have with this board every time they want to implement something on a property that they've purchased. It's hard not to reiterate what this gentleman just said, because he did encompass a lot of it. My concern is who is to say, and why should they have to say so, as to what gets to be taken out, what gets to be left in. Who's to say, and what qualifications do you need in order to say that?
All right. So your concern has to do with one of Michael's concerns, which was how does the supervisory authority evaluate what's being proposed? For example, if the building inspector is looking at a building permit, is he, to what extent is he also looking at the lot clearing aspects of the application? Is that
Well, I think
what your concern is?
No, what I'm saying is, what qualifications does an individual have to monitor a situation like this? What qualifications would you need to tell a homeowner who just purchased a home and they have their own ideas that I don't like your creative ideas because I'm more creative? Or how exactly would you implement that? Who has the right to do so? Is it a collective process? Is it someone with some sort of a formal degree? I'm really I'm perplexed that something like this could come across
Well, let me
as an amendment.
just let me ask you, Joel. How did you see that playing out? The review aspect.
Well, yeah, maybe I need to clarify something. It's not intended, and maybe the introduction of the word creative has gotten people thinking in another direction. This bylaw is not intended to introduce a new concept in the bylaw that calls for somebody to review what will or will not get altered on a site. So in other words, after a building permit's been issued, site plan approval's been issued, special permit's been issued, as part of those approval processes, whatever gets approved or not approved under today's bylaws is not changed. All this changes. In other words, there will be no new reviews under this bylaw of landscaping, of tree removal, or whatever else. The only thing that changes is it says, whatever it is you hope to do later, you have to wait till later to do it. You can't do it until you pull your permit. The idea being that there should
Give
be...
us like an example, like if someone buys a home and let's say hypothetically they have other intentions for that property. What would the process be and how is this more stringent than what's in place right now?
So if somebody buys a home, excuse me, and has no intention of altering the home, and they just want to change the landscape, they just don't like how it's
Right.
landscaped. So that is meant to be exempted, and that's why the language is in here saying this section is not intended to interfere with creative use of land, nor to interfere with routine property maintenance, or the use of land for activities customarily accessory to residential uses. So if you want to put in a tennis court, a swimming pool, or re-landscape, or as was mentioned, you need to expand your septic system or whatever, those are all customarily incidental. It's not regulated. The point of this is only
Joe, it's not regulated by this
by this new language.
new language.
By
It
this
still
new
may
language.
be regulated by other town laws,
Right.
state law, and all that.
Right. So you have somebody who buys, let's say, a 4,000 square foot home. They're only interested in landscaping, not covered here. They buy a 4,000 square foot home, want to make it 8,000 square feet. Then, before they can begin doing the land clearing and so forth, then that work, provided that the building inspector finds that to be a substantial change, then no site preparation work can be done. So it's really until the building permit is issued or site plan approval is granted. It's intended to get at site preparation work for a construction project. It's really not designed to regulate, and I think the language is clear. And let me say, many communities do have this.
I think the concern is that it leaves a lot of interpretation, a lot of room for interpretation, and you can interpret it creates this giant umbrella for somebody if they want to tell you what to do with your property.
Joel, I have a
And
kind of, I think it's a related question. I'm looking, when you buy up this Jonathan White, on 54 Pinecroft, when I'm looking at the second half of that, the main paragraph here, not vacant lots, now question on a lot with a structure on it. It's the limitation shall apply to lots with existing structures when it will be proposed to demolish or replace. How would the town ever enforce it? You know, if someone says, well, I bought the house and I wanted to let light in, and so they clear the lot, and then 6 months later, a year later, 2 years later, they say, I changed my mind. I decided I don't like this house anymore. I'm going to take it down, or now I want to make an addition. That language almost seems it says you have to get into the property owner's head and what their intent is. And is it the building inspector who I don't know how that would ever be enforced.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think, Jonathan, it gets into, it's another facet of the issue that Michael raised at the outset, and I think clearly there's a gray area there. I mean, that does get at an issue that exists here. I think in most instances, I think the cause and effect is going to be clear, and you've posited a situation that perhaps is quite unlikely, but could occur, then I think a building inspector would have to exercise.
I think another example occurs to me. Someone's about to list their property, and I'm a person who likes to have light coming in, so I say, I think my property will sell better if I clear more trees around the house. And you look at the house, and it's probably not savable, but who knows? There's just so many gray areas. I don't know how you attack it, but it just doesn't seem like that gets at what you're looking at. You're getting into the intent of the person who cuts down the tree. For the most part, I assume we're looking at cutting down the trees.
Well, and
Regrade.
Or regrading, even more so in some extent, but the more common one is just cut down the trees around the house.
Could I add, Joel, you said substantial when you commented about, when you responded, but it just says no site alteration or development work. It doesn't say no substantial.
You don't know how to square it with the preamble.
well, that refers to the last sentence in the middle paragraph, where, because we have two situations, one are the vacant lots, where it should be a little more clear cut, but the last sentence there applies to, this limitation shall also apply to lots with existing structures when it will be proposed to demolish or replace all or a substantial portion of an existing dwelling.
No, but you used substantial when you were describing the decision by the building inspector on substantial landscaping work having been done.
No, I believe well, maybe I wasn't clear. I was referring to somebody who bought a 4,000 square foot home and decided they wanted to add.
No, I heard that, but you used the word substantial, and when you described the alterations to the landscape, and I'm just saying, this says no.
Yes.
And that means I can't remove a poison ivy. That's alteration.
No, that's a routine maintenance. I mean,
How
It says
how does
no.
it say?
is there anybody in this room who
It
doesn't
says
think
no
that
site
removal of
alteration
poison
or
ivy-
removal of the
That's what they're
subdivision.
saying.
Yeah.
You really can't square the preamble with the next paragraph.
It says no
They're
removal of
clash.
vegetation.
I think
the other
even
thing
going
is-
back, Ken Stevens,
if I
121.
could-
Let's start to get out of control.
Sorry.
If you guys could address your comments to me, and then I could, yeah, go ahead.
Joel, finish, please.
Well, that's okay. I mean, I had jumped in as well, so I'll take the chair's lead.
He was asking a rhetorical
Ken
question anyway.
Stevens, 121 Rolling Lane, 1 Green Lane. Even the first sentence, the intent of this section is to prevent unnecessary and avoidable alteration of Who defines that? Who defines unnecessary and avoidable? I think unfortunately, look, there's an under 6,000 square foot rule, and there's an over 6,000 square foot rule, and we're all going through the various processes to go through planning board with an over 6,000 square foot house. And you guys have fabulous controls on how to landscape. We hired the best landscape architects to over-architect, almost cause the homes to now be invisible. The word invisible has come up in the planning board vernacular about making new homes invisible. So you do have terrific stringent controls over the over 6,000 foot houses. So it's fairly obvious that we're talking about homes that are going to be developed at under 6,000 square feet. Is there any... I don't know how we back up and give you the ability to control those as well. and which is what this bylaw is all about. From the builders in the room, it seems like, at least it seems like to us. Is that correct?
I disagree. I think this bylaw is written to control the houses that are over 6,000 square feet, because if you read it, if you get all the permits that you're supposed to get, you can still do anything you want in the under 6,000 square feet.
You would think so.
But-
You're following-
But unless
you
you
would
go
think
to change it to
You-
something
you would
over
think so.
6,000 square feet at some point, that's where I think you can get into some trouble. Someone wants to finish an attic, someone wants to put an addition on a house that's just under 6,000 square feet. Now you've got another big gray area of trouble
That's not-
that
I'm
could-
not reading it this way.
That's
Well,
not
well,
what
well,
it reads.
That's not it.
I'm sorry, I'm not
This is
reading it that
Mario's
way.
opinion. May I just bring this back to what Joel said originally?
Just a
which is-
quick comment, if you
just
don't
a minute.
mind, before I lose the whole comment here, which is our concern as citizens of this town. I'm a resident here for 16 years. Our concern is that this is another form of devaluation with respect to the properties that we own. When people come to purchase here, this will be something that they look at. One of the things that I hear routinely is septics. Oh God, we don't want to deal with septics. If this happens and you start limiting residents from manicuring the properties the way they see fit, it's another form of devaluation.
This doesn't,
Sorry.
well, two comments, just hold on, Olga, and then I'll follow you. First comment is, I want to go back to what Joel was saying initially, which is the purpose of this is just to say you can't clear the lot. If you're gonna build a new house in town, or if you're gonna put a substantial addition on, you've got to get the permits first before you clear the land. That's the intent. I don't know why that seems to be an unreasonable.
Well, permit for what, sir? What, permit for
Building
what?
permit or site plan review.
But we already have to do that.
Mm.
Well, exactly. So all this says is you don't.
No, earth removing, earth moving.
I mean,
There's
this
so
is-
many other,
No,
This
no.
is a
All
different
the,
litmus test that, that really is left to interpretation.
no, I'm saying what the intent is. Your interpretation, what you're afraid of is that this is
Yes.
somehow not what this means. But this is,
Yes.
believe me, the only thing this is meant to do is to say, don't jump the gun by clearing the lot until you have a building permit or site plan review. That's all it's asking to do. It's not telling you you can't landscape your yard any way you want. It's not saying you can't put a pool in. It's not saying you can't do any of the things that you would commonly do. It's just that if you're going to build a new house or replace a house or put a substantial addition on, all you got to do is get the building permit or site plan review first before you do the clearing and regrading.
it's not that, it's.
Well, if it's not clear, that's the intent. Yes.
Can I ask my question?
Yes, Olga. You're Olga.
Olga Schulman, 32 Winter. So what I don't understand here is, and this is, I'm not commenting, I'm asking a question to clarify this. Does this mean that I go to a building department to get a building permit to put 1,000 square foot addition on a 4,000 square foot house? So let's say I go to get a building permit. I also need to do a septic system because I'm adding a couple of bedrooms. So I need to do a septic system that will cut my trees. So let's say I go to do a building permit. I come to John Fields and he says, before you do a building permit, you have to do what? Site plan review?
No.
What do you need to do?
Nothing.
So what is it?
Nothing.
Wait. So what is it that this does? What does he?
It
Is
says-
he going to control which trees I cut?
No, it just says don't cut them down
Wait.
before you get the permit.
But I don't understand what is the purpose of this wording then, because if I go to John and he says, well, you're supposed to give me this, that, I give him this, that, and I cut my trees.
Right.
So what exactly is the purpose of
What-
these words? What do they do? I don't understand
It says
what
don't
it does.
cut the trees first until you get the
No,
permit.
but are you going to ask me to call the neighbors and ask them which trees to cut? Are you
No.
going to ask me to change the way I do my permitting?
Nope.
So what is the purpose
All right,
of this?
to go back to the first meeting, one of the concerns that we've heard from a number of people in town who don't have to be builders, but who live in town, some of which have lived here for at least 16 years, is that one of the things that they're seeing is sort of a general site prep in anticipation of construction. So
I understand that.
But that's
what
what this is
cannot
about.
understand, no, I understand what it's all about. I cannot understand what this does.
this just says,
What does it do?
Why do
this says don't cut all the trees and regrade the land until
Okay,
you have
fine.
the right permits in
But
place.
how will you
puts- it
stop me
puts-
from cutting it
Olga,
afterwards? I
it
don't
puts
understand this.
It puts it all into a consistent plan rather than
How is
an
it less
inconsistent.
consistent? Look, when I come in to build my house and I cut my trees, normally, if you've seen any of the houses that I build, and I think you've seen almost all of them, right?
Yeah.
Normally, I don't cut more than I need. I usually cut only what I need for my septic system and for my house and for
Yeah.
a little bit of backyard. I actually usually fight for all the trees.
One of your
correct?
houses is next door to me, and you're absolutely
Exactly.
right. That's the
Exactly.
way that you
So-
build.
Exactly. So here's my
Not
question.
everyone builds that way.
Wait, so when I come in to build, I already have the plan, I already have the intent. Let's say I come to John Fields for my permit. What changes for me as a result of this?
Nothing, absolutely nothing.
Why implement this?
Then why implement it?
Because as David just said, Olga, not everybody actually engages in the process that way. What we've heard people telling us and what we've observed is that to an increasing degree, people are actually clearing and regrading in anticipation of getting a building permit and construction later.
Okay, so
And-
my question is,
No,
what
wait a
will
minute,
change?
wait a minute.
Yeah,
You know, people, what we have seen come in, and what we do get a lot of complaints about from citizens, your customers, either in the past or the future, or maybe not, but what we do see, okay, are that people would come in and they don't have a plan for where the house is going to be or the septic, but they're clear cutting it so that there's nothing there. Okay,
who is
you
clear
don't
cutting?
do this.
Who's clear cutting, the customer or the builder?
The owner slash builder in
The
some
owner of the
cases.
property.
Sometimes it's the builder who is doing it on spec, and they say, okay, I'm gonna have this clear lot, so we can put anything we want, anywhere we want, kind of thing. As opposed to looking at
But my
what the
question
natural
to you-
setting is,
I
how it
understand.
affects the neighbors, how it
I
affects
understand, but who
the
is going to be
community.
looking at how it affects anything when I go to John Fields and he issues my permit? I still don't understand what it is that
Nothing
you're
changes.
I don't think it's gonna change how you do business.
So-
It may
Oh, wait,
change how
so
some
what's the
other people
purpose?
do business.
The
It
per-
may change how
doesn't
other
affect you.
people do
Then it doesn't
business.
affect you at all.
Because you
I
do
mean,
business in a different way than others.
No, see, now that's left to
I don't think you
interpretation.
understand my question.
No, it's real
Actually,
obvious.
this is
Is
very
it number of
open-ended.
trees that you're talking about? Is
No.
it seven?
Percent.
No.
It just says,
Percentage of trees?
No,
It's
it's
timing.
Did you get a,
timing.
you just came in,
It's
did
about
you
the
get a copy?
timing.
Only
There's a copy
about-
up
It's
there in the
unambiguous,
state.
but I'll give you a copy. Here you go.
It's only about the timing of when you do what.
But how will the timing change the process? I don't understand what the timing will change in the amount of trees that go down.
I think what she's saying is that if she applies for a permit now, there's no review of the trees she cuts down.
There wouldn't be.
And there wouldn't be later, so why do we care? Apparently, the question is, why do we care if she cuts them down before? If
Exactly.
we don't care if she cuts them down after?
Again, let me try to
No, I-
just underline what David said. What we're seeing is
No,
sort
I-
of the clear cutting, so you get a general pad where the house can land. And what we would like to do is say, wait a minute, let's have that process work in
No, no, I
train with the
understand.
building permit.
But
I
does
think
it
what Olga
matter?
is saying is that if I just wait and put the house anywhere I want, there's no review of all the trees I cut down now under the bylaws, so why would there be a review before I do it?
It's
I think
like-
Why am I
this
not
is
waiting?
getting a review.
If I can just add something as far as, I think
Well,
out
a
of anyone,
prohibition on it, yes.
I'm sort of the front lines between, I think, both sides, between developers as well as residents. And something that I hear a lot of complaints are is, right down the street, someone just leveled the property. What's going on? And us in the building department are like, we don't know because we haven't had any building permits submitted or no one's done it. It's been in anticipation of submitting a building permit. There are some properties that it was for a limited building permit associated, but there are many properties where a lot is cleared and we get the public complaint saying what's going on and we don't have an answer. And that's what the board is trying to address. It doesn't address the end, this doesn't address the end result. It just says, don't clear cut the trees until
So my
people know what's
question
going
You're
is,
not giving that
in which
property
case-
owner any rights.
In
So
which-
you're saying that the neighborhood should control what you do on your property, Mr.
And
O'Barry.
in which case,
So-
what Ken said
Good, that's what
makes
it
sense.
is.
If you're going to do it like you would other things. Give it a percentage. Give it a percentage with respect to the
It's
lot.
not
If you're
about
going to-
percentages.
I know, you shouldn't do it at all, but.
It's about timing, not percentages. I think that's what people are failing to
Well,
understand.
bringing the whole process, that part that is going to cut down some trees, it's going to landscape some, and it's going to build some, bringing that all together into a consistent,
But what-
wait a minute, let me finish, into a plan that is cohesive and works together. Whether or not it comes before this board or not is going to depend on how large it is in relationship to the site.
Okay.
It may not come to
I
this
understand,
board.
but what if I simply want a view? I don't care about a plan. I don't have any plan. I bought a land, I want a view. I just want a meadow.
If
So how do I, what are
you
we
can have
talking?
your meadow. This
Who's
this
to
only
say?
pertains to new construction or replacement construction or substantial additions. If you wanted to cut, if you live in your house and you want to cut down every tree to get a 360-degree view, and you're not going to build a new house or
What if I plan to sell my house?
well, that
I don't
goes
know
back
when I want to sell
Michael
my house.
Harity's initial question, and I think that I think Michael's concerns are quite valid. The question is, if this is a question of timing, then the reverse timing also has to apply, which is, if you cut down all your trees 3 weeks before you sell your house, there's a suggestion there that you're clearing it in advance of some sort of landing pad for a replacement house later. However,
So what? So you improve the
I'm
value
just-
of your lot.
But-
You're not entitled to improve the value of your land
And the problem
by
here
clearing a
is
view?
your
Come on.
planning board gets to,
That's-
at this point, say, you can do this, you can't do this,
Sorry,
you can
Joe.
do this, and you can't do this. And to be able to say who can and can't.
it's not about who can and
Control
can't.
their own
It's only about
I-
the timing of a building permit application.
There
Yes.
seems to also just be a misunderstanding. There's a reason we have zoning bylaws. But what you're saying is, we don't need any zoning bylaws. Property rights for all, 100%, do whatever you want with your land.
No.
Well, that's kind of
No,
what you're
that's
saying
not
to
what
me.
I'm
Is
saying.
if we do
No, that's not what
anything,
I'm saying.
it's, we shouldn't have any impingement upon our building. And I have to go back
I'm not
to
saying
I'm not
Mario.
saying that.
Well,
No,
I'm
he's
glad
not
you're not
saying
saying
that.
it. Good, good,
Okay,
I'm glad
we
you
established that.
We've established you haven't
Okay,
said that.
good.
But Mario, I kind of go along with his interpretation here, which this really applies to properties that are over 5,000, over 6,000 square feet. And also the ones that we see all the time, which are 5,999 that get sold, and then the people want to finish out the extra 5,000 square foot space in it, and then they come back to us, and then at that point, we're left with naked, clear-cut lots. And so I'm wondering if maybe we just have something that, when a house is sold, I mean, because this doesn't seem to be private homeowners so much as, I don't want to say this, our builder developers, but maybe we need to something like a moratorium, that if you build a house that's 5,998 square feet and you sell it, that the buyers have to know that they can't come back to the planning board to finish out space for a year or 2 years. And I know you're going to say, oh my God, you're killing us here. But we're not really
So
killing
that's
you.
not what this is about.
It
Not
has
what
nothing
it's
to do
about
with
at all.
the space.
All right, come on.
Besides,
Sorry.
what
Well,
if
it
they
does have
finish
to
an
do with
attic?
space.
How does that affect the landscaping? If they finish an attic, they're not touching anyone.
Right.
So how does that
But
affect
no,
landscaping?
how it might affect.
That's
No,
ridiculous.
but how we might affect people is that by keeping the builders, without having to clear the entire 2 acres to
The
build a new
builders are
house.
still going to clear the entire 2 acres if you're telling me that nothing changes, that all I do is go for a permit, correct? I am just
Only if
going
it's
for a
under
permit.
6,000 square feet.
Yes, I'm going
Or
for
if
a
you go for
permit.
site plan review.
Or site plan review.
But we're not talking about adding a site
So
plan
you're
review,
saying, well,
correct?
this is what Michael was saying at the last meeting.
No, we're not talking about adding site plan review. All we're doing is, again, I want to reiterate that all we're doing is suggesting that you not clear and regrade your land before you get your building permit or your site plan review permit.
But
That's
you're
all.
talking about intent. I am a female, I change my mind. Sometimes I want to do something today, sometimes I do not want to do something tomorrow that I thought I was going to want to do tomorrow. So, you're talking about intent here. You're talking about the fact that I want to clear my lot, then maybe I want to sell the house, maybe I don't want to sell the house. It's my lot. How do you deal with intent in this
But
case?
again, what we're beginning to do is reiterate Michael's first question over and over. Joel, you wanted to say something, and then I'll call on you, and then I'll call on you.
I'm going to say something different. I want to give folks an illustration, and I don't want to get specific. I'm sure a lot of you will recognize the property, but it's beside the point. We are trying to settle some litigation that's more than 10 years old, so likely doesn't involve any of you. Maybe it does. I wouldn't know. But somebody cleared a site before they started doing any work, before they got their permits, I believe. In fact, that's right, they appealed a permit that they got, so that the permit never got final, and went ahead and did substantial clearing. The litigation has been resolved for a long time, and what we've been talking about for more than 2 years now has been the restoration of the site that they need to do. They got site plan approval from the planning board. They appealed it, the court upheld it. And what the clearing that they did was inconsistent with their own site plan that they had approved. So they need to do a certain level of restoration. 10 years, a lot of things have grown up. We're spending way too much time talking about restoring work that should never have been done. So it's just one random example. It's not a perfect example. There are aspects of it that don't fit, but it's a concrete example of what happened here in this town, where somebody did a lot of site work before the final site design, their own site design. The town, it's not like, they got pushed around. A lot of pushback, as you know, comes from neighbors, as someone said, many of them your former clients, and people expect a certain standard, obviously.
But how does this change anything?
All it changes is it prevents that person, that real life example I gave you, it prevents them from doing substantial site clearance before they have their, in that case, a final site plan approval or a building permit. It changes nothing else. It doesn't change how many trees after you get your building permit, after you get your site plan permit, you can take down all the trees that were shown in your site plan. You can, if you have a 4,000 square foot house and you go through site plan review, you can do whatever you want.
Again, but this doesn't
What's the
define
reason?
substantial.
Yeah.
This
Substantial
doesn't
has-
define anything. It leaves it
Substantial-
so elusive. It leaves
No,
it
would you
to
listen,
interpretation.
please? Substantial doesn't enter into it.
Could it be
If-
one tree, two
if
trees?
it's-
What is it?
It's zero regulation of your landscaping. Zero regulation of your landscaping. If you are pulling... Ultimately, again, as I said last time, and I'll reiterate it again, I don't want to appear to be advocating for this bylaw. It's extremely difficult because the comments you're making are not consistent with the language on the page. I'm just trying to explain what's on here. Ultimately, town meeting is going to decide yes or no, but this bylaw doesn't say anything about how you landscape, whether it's 0 trees or 500 trees you take down. It only says you can't do any site alteration. And by the way, the point was made, it's really more targeted. I mean, the issue more significantly, if you will, because trees can be planted, it's more difficult to re-landscape after there's been a very large-scale alteration of the topography. All it's saying is, wait until you get those permits. That's
So
all
when
it's
the
saying. It's a
building
question
permit
of
is
timing.
issued, is the building inspector going to do some kind of,
Who's going to?
No, finish the question, let her finish the
some
question.
kind of, I can't understand how to call it, some kind of
Survey.
review or
No.
survey or what?
No.
No.
Oh, you mean to see if you did some pre-site clearance?
No,
Or
no,
of your
to
project?
see-
Zero.
So what's the point?
So wait a
Then
minute,
what's the
yes,
point?
Okay, so who's going to oversee this?
The
Who's
point,
going to
let me
walk
answer
to
the
the lot
question.
and walk around?
What
and
is the
check
point?
the trees?
The point is to ask you to wait to do your site clearance till after you get the building permit or after you get the site plan review. That's all the point is. Wait, is there a question there?
I still don't understand what happens with the person who is selling the house and wants to clear it.
That goes back to Michael's first question, and that's, I think that's one that we ought to think about some more. Yeah, I said I'd call on you next, so.
Mark Cahill, Sherburne Circle. I actually have a property that I'm in the process of getting permitted. I hope to have demolition and possibly building permits sooner than later. So the way that this is written, I mean, we're talking about, mostly the examples you people are talking about are things that could happen, okay? If this was passed, how does it affect me? What it means is that I can't cut any trees until I have all these permits. Well, you know, I'm already in stormwater, getting my stormwater approved. I've got fire department write-up, I got plans in the process, I got stuff in the building department. I've already got letters from the planning board. I mean, I'm at a point where I don't see why I can't take down any trees. All it does is delay my construction, because getting the trees out of the way before the house gets taken down is advantageous, or can be advantageous, and it's a part of the process, building process, that I can get out of the way. So why should I have to wait if after I get all these approvals, you're not going to tell me that I can't cut any
Exactly.
trees? So
Exactly.
in my example, the world that I live in, I think the world Mario lives in, Olga lives in, maybe Ken, you know, we have stuff that we're permitting, and we want to cut our trees, and we're not the people.
And we're
You
carrying
know, maybe
these
some of us have in
problems.
the past, but, you know, I've never gone in and cleared a lot. I've got 4 properties that I've taken through the planning board. I owned a piece of property on Highland Street. I couldn't even drive on my property until the day that I started construction, because there was a wall down the front, let alone cut a tree. So, you know, anything over 6,000 is being controlled by the planning board. But my little world, and I've got a house that I want to get going really quickly, it's getting cold. If you're not going to tell me when I'm going to cut the trees, why should I have to wait until I get a building permit?
Exactly.
You said you.
Yeah. I was just wondering if there was a way you could.
Could you just identify yourself, please?
Robin Coots, Hemlock Road. If you could be more specific about certain terms, define them a bit better so they're less discretionary, like removal of vegetation, excavation, substantial. Yeah, that's completely open to interpretation.
I think one of the comments we've heard is that there's a lot of vagueness here, and I think that may be contributing to the confusion. Yes.
Significance. I
So,
recall.
Jonathan White again, 2 comments, and I think they're both due. One is, I know exactly what you're trying to get at, I understand it. I'm concerned about the presumption that if you own a vacant lot, that you can't touch it unless you get either a building permit or go through site plan approval for a bigger house, because it doesn't happen often, but there's certainly plenty of uses under the bylaw that you can put to a vacant lot. You know, certainly no property that straddles 2 roads, if they bought it strictly to, you know, to farm it.
Well, Joe, would you like to respond to that one? I think what I heard Jonathan say is that there's a concern about clearing a vacant lot for something other than a building. Was that your comment?
Yeah, I think I mentioned, and this is repetitive, last time I said, we still have the right even to use our properties as a woodlot here. It's a by right use. I agree with you, it's not the best use of the property, but someone could cut it and say, well, I decided I wanted to sell the wood. And yeah, then I ended up with a vacant lot, and yeah, maybe I will build on it. You know,
Right.
So it's a drafting question, I think, is what I'm throwing out there. I'll really quickly do the second one, and then I'll stand back. Is if you're going after that, the other thing you have for vacant lots versus lots with structures on them is you have lots that have a structure that also have a vacant lot right beside it. I don't know, all of this, a buildable lot, dividable into a buildable lot, and how that would impact this. But those are the two comments.
Well, okay. Joel, any comment you'd like to make on that?
Well, on the first point, and I heard the comment last time,
Yeah.
I didn't know if it's rhetorical or not. I mean, to the extent somebody's
No,
going
sure.
to use a valuable building lot in Weston for cordwood, I don't know. But if there's thinking that that's realistically could put that in as an express exemption for a wood lot or agriculture or whatever.
It's already exempted, isn't it?
Well, I mean,
This would-
in terms of exempting it from this.
It's not exempt from this proposed bylaw.
Really?
No.
I thought
Well,
agricultural uses were exempted from all the bylaw.
you're right.
Farming.
The use of land for
That's
agriculture.
a big umbrella.
No, the use of land for agriculture would
If you're
include
doing something
lots.
on this lot, on the lot, that does not require a building permit or a site plan approval, then it's not relevant.
But
Right.
that's not what it says.
Yeah,
But then maybe that is a drafting issue.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's meant to say.
It is meant to talk about clearing a lot, altering a lot in anticipation of development.
Right.
And so, to
So,
the
I
extent
mean,
that there might be
I've had
so
two
there's probably got to be some sort of a sunset on this, like, oh, yeah, I'm clearing my lot for my view or for my wood. Oh, and 30 days later, I want to build something,
I've
or
had-
a year later, or whatever. I mean, there needs to be some
It
sort
goes
of,
back to Michael's.
it becomes a time. thing.
Maybe more believable in Weston, understandable, is buying the undeveloped lot next door for your tennis court. And I've seen that one.
Which
That
this
is
is not meant to
covered.
cover at all.
well, and that is covered by, wherever it is, but.
It doesn't need a building permit,
No.
Or
but
to,
it's an empty lot.
doesn't cover the use of land for activities customarily accessory to residential uses. And I think at the outset I mentioned tennis courts or
But
swimming
it-
pools.
Traditionally, accessory
have to have a
use
house
has
on
to be
it.
has to have a house on that lot. It's not an accessory use.
Oh, I see, a separate lot.
Yeah.
All right. Ken, you had your hand raised. Did you want to say anything?
Joe mentioned that about a permit or an ancillary permit being pulled for to do work on the site, and one of the reasons, in all honesty, this discussion has come up is because Mrs. Munro is living next to the site that I am potentially going to build on Rolling Lane. I took John Field out there to tell him that I wanted to prove the lot because it's a ledge pile. My intent is to do a 6,000 foot or under house out there. And I pulled a building permit, engineered wall, went through Rob Jammer, pulled the best consultants in town to design a rock wall. And that was the reason that I called Mr. Fields out there and he issued me a building permit for the rock wall, not a building for a structure. I don't know when I'm going to start that house. But right now, the lot is improved to where now buyers, and I'm in the spec business, I'm sorry for being such a whore, but I'm in the spec business of building. And I make my money, and I make a lot of it doing what I do. Now
I
buyers...
went on the record that none of us.
No one shook their head yet.
Ever a few. I'm going to pull a building permit for a 6,000 foot house within the next, hopefully, 60 days.
5999.
599 point whatever it is. And that's always been my intent. So my intent was to show what the lot could look like. It's a almost 3-acre parcel. I've developed, cut trees, cleared ledge on less than a third of the lot, and it looks spectacular. And I think Mrs. Munro, unfortunately she's not here, but I think she would now agree that what I've done is fairly compatible with the area. So what were my choices? I went through due process again with the zoning administrator. I pulled a building permit with a structural wall designed by one of the top engineers in town. I went through the latest guy in town who's, costing us a fortune as a developer, and that's stormwater review, which is a mass approved deal. I went through all that. What else do you want us to do?
Exactly.
It's very, very frustrating for us guys who are in the business of building homes for other people who want to be here. We're trying to follow the rules, but if we go over 6,000 feet, we do come before 3 or 4 meetings with planning board review, where one neighbour can cost a poor homeowner hundreds of thousands of dollars in 32-foot trees and remediation here and there, and you do get a terrific say in that. And honestly, I appreciate that. I really do. You guys do a great
I
job with
assume
that.
that's why you're able to charge a premium for your homes.
I wish we could.
Yeah?
I wish we could, but
So
it
you're
doesn't.
losing money every one of these houses.
I don't take
All right, never mind, sorry, I retract that
All right,
statement.
well,
that comment, unfortunately, Sue, that comment comes in line with, why does anyone need a 10,000-foot house? That's up to them. It's not up to you, it's not up to me, it's up to them, right? I don't ever comment on what a person who has worked their butts off and can afford that.
Absolutely in your court on that.
Please, so no comments like that, thanks.
But I didn't say anything about people wanting a 10,000 square foot.
No, but you were saying
You
about
intimated
his
that
profit.
through your comments.
We're talking about my
All right,
profit.
I think we're just
We're
sort of-
just
So anyway,
digressing now.
I just, it's a little bit frustrating,
the
guys,
story.
to...
And it's possible that under this, you have cleared all the hurdles. So I don't think that's, you're necessarily in the crosshairs there. All we're saying is, if you've gotten the permits that allow you to clear the trees, clear the trees.
Now, Mr. Chairman, my point was, it wasn't a building permit for a 6,000-foot house or a 10,000-foot house. It was a building permit for a wall.
Yeah, well,
Exactly.
it might be.
That is what it was. And less than 5, I think I put in for less than 5,000 cubic feet, whatever that other bylaw is with
Right.
the earth movement.
No, that doesn't apply to you anyway.
It wouldn't apply.
Okay.
Yes, you had a comment.
Who would enforce all this? Is this planning, zoning, or is it a different department?
I think you came in late. Actually, could you just identify
My
yourself?
name is Ken Page, I live in Delmer Grove.
This actually is a matter of just of timing. The enforcement authority is exactly the same as you would see today. That is, if you go in for a building permit, you see the building inspector, and you get the building permit, and you can do what the building permit allows you to do. If you have to go for site plan review, you get the site plan review decision, and then you can go ahead with whatever you want to do. It doesn't affect the process, it only affects the timing.
What this thing reminds me of is, if I have a teenage daughter and I tell her you cannot wear a short skirt until I tell you that you can wear a short skirt, which will be 5 minutes after you want to wear a short skirt. It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense, because if I'm going to cut these trees anyway, why do you have to stop me before I cut these trees? If I'm going to cut them the same way, it just makes no sense to me. I'm sorry.
I think we're actually starting to repeat the conversation.
Yeah.
And
I have a new comment.
all right, if you have a new comment, that's great.
I'm just wondering how this will affect properties that are on scenic roads. For example, it says You know, obviously, if you're on a scenic road, it affects you automatically, even if you don't get a building permit. Building permit won't work. You need a site plan approval, which means...
For a new house.
Right, for a new house, or what the definition of a new house is. So if someone wants to do some work on their house and it ends up starting like a small project, it turns into a bigger project. So it will affect properties that are on scenic roads. It's sort of, I'm going to say, it's sort of the biggest blow will be taken, but if this bylaw passes, the biggest blow will be taken by properties that are on scenic roads. And so I'm a little concerned about that because I think those properties are already, since 1997. Yeah.
Why do you think that? Because if you're talking about site plan review anyway.
No, because let's say you live on a scenic road and you want to sell your property, and you want to make an improvement similar to building this retaining wall that Ken was talking about. You know, you've been there for a long time. The vegetation has kind of grown into the house over the years. Now you have to sell it. You know, you could be elderly and your kids want to improve the property to sell it or whatever. And now you just I think you're creating a little bit of a burden and also opening them up for some kind of a lawsuit from a neighbor or something like that, because maybe they cut the trees and then someone comes along and builds a house and I think you're exposing them to some risks of improving their property. In other words, if they want to improve their property, they're burdened by this risk of breaking the law unintentionally, but then someone else might see it as intentional.
But it's only in anticipation of development.
Well, I understand that, but realistically, if you do live on, if your property is in need, is a lot of deferred maintenance, realistically, it's probably going to be redeveloped within the definitions of the new house. I mean, whether it's a big addition or whether it's, the definition of new house keeps expanding to the point where really some of these, and I think you're going to be talking about it soon, some of the substantial demolition is becoming, defined as a new house. And so I just think properties that are on scenic roads are going to take a big brunt of burden by this law. So all I'm saying is, I just think this is a significant enough proposal that, in my opinion, it should maybe get a little bit more work based on all the comments that I've heard tonight and the vagueness of the way it's written. Maybe it should just get a little bit more work and it should be brought into annual town meeting, because it's an important, in my opinion, I think it does affect property owner rights to the point where it's a significant thing. I think residents and property owners should be educated as far as how it could affect them, especially the ones that are on scenic roads, because I think they're going to take a big, take a big part of the burden of this new bylaw.
Okay.
And in your comment also.
All right. But we're like a half an hour over what our limit was going to be. What I'd like to do is take two more comments. I think the planning board's decision here, and I'm not sure that we're going to make it tonight, is whether the language of this bylaw is well enough thought out so that we can go forward with it at this town meeting, or whether we should hold other hearings on it. I think that's the basic question. And so we'll need to make that decision, and I would suggest that we continue this until next week to make the decision on all of the proposed amendments together. But having said that, I think we've all heard everything that you had to say. We understand your concerns. We understand where you're coming from. I note that everyone who's made a comment, or almost everyone, is in some way in the house building business. So this is in your wheelhouse, and we understand that. I hope you understand that we actually also have to speak for the rest of the people in town that voted for us and that come to us with concerns. So, having said that, two comments, and then we'll wrap this up and go on to the next one. Yes.
Actually, what Mario said just gave me another thought, which I completely didn't even think about. When you give somebody a wording that says no site alteration or development work, including this, that, it's kind of like, and pardon if my language is wrong, but I'm translating from Russian and it may come out wrong, but it's kind of like showing red to the bull. The reason I'm saying this is when you are giving a neighbor an idea that something is not permitted, but it's actually permitted, but it's only a time issue, but you are creating a situation for yourself where people are going to start coming to you doing like this and saying, I thought this was not permitted. What did you just pass? This was not permitted, and they still cut everything. What did you just do? I think you're just you're opening a huge Pandora's box where you're irritating the neighbors, giving them the hope that they can control somebody where they really can't. I think you really shouldn't be doing stuff like this because it only creates strife with no real solution, just a lot of arguments between neighbors. I think people should understand that their neighbor has a right to have a meadow just like they have a meadow. Because most of the time what I've seen is somebody with a clear-cut lot starts arguing when their neighbor starts cutting the trees because now they lost the cover that their neighbor had, not what they had on their own lot. That's what usually happens.
Okay, I got it. No, honestly, Robin, Michael had his hand up first, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that there may be some unintended consequences here, as there always are in working things out as complicated as this. But since it says in anticipation of, I think brokers may suggest to owners of older homes, no one's going to argue that you're in anticipation of building if you're just in anticipation of a sale. So you may be best off doing clear cutting now in anticipation of a sale.
We raised that in the first session of the hearing.
I didn't say anything, but I'm Catherine Richland, and I work at Coldwell Banker. I live in Sherwood Circle, and I got to tell you, every house I go into, the people ask me, I'll go in a year before, it could be in 2 years, we're thinking of selling our house, what should we do to get it ready? And honestly, how can I look at them and say, oh, I see all these trees going down the driveway, no one's going to want this dark lot? I mean, it's just setting us up, too. You're setting us up to have to say to them, you know, you really should anticipate that you may get somebody that wants to add on to this house or knock it down. I mean, they're knocking down homes now.
Gets back to Michael's first question. I'm sorry. I said 2 comments and it's already been 3. Robin, I'll give you 1 minute.
I want to correct something you said, Al. I'm not in the house building business.
I said not everybody.
I thought you said everybody who has made a comment.
No, I didn't say everybody, Robin, because I don't believe Michael's in the house building business or Ed Coburn either. What? Yes.
Just a couple of things that I don't think warrant discussion or that I don't want to warrant discussion. Joe, perhaps at the next meeting you could give us a couple of examples of other towns that have similar bylaws and what the wording is on those. Because somehow it got through their town meeting and maybe they figured out some kind of wording that's clearer.
Just if I can answer quickly, the heart of this is from an abutting town that's raised no issues in the dozen years I've represented them. Give you that language. Yeah.
The laws are so much bigger.
And then another thing, it sounds like 90% of the comments people have made have to do with cutting trees or clear cutting. Just throwing this out there, and we don't need to discuss it now, but again, it's food for thought. Maybe if we just deleted the language in the proposed bylaw that said removal of vegetation, or alteration to vegetation, and so all we're really talking about is development work, including excavation, stockpiling of fill, or grading. Because if you do those things, you're going to have to cut down. Likely is you would have to cut down a lot of trees, and that's really the stuff that is very difficult to undo. I mean, it's difficult to undo cutting down 100-year-old trees too, but that just seems to be what most people are talking about. So again, food for thought for next week. And just the last thing I'd like to say is, what would happen if you had done what you've done to that lot, and then you could change your mind in the same way that Olga changes your mind, and you decide you want to build a house larger than 6,000 square feet. Now you come in front of the planning board, and we can't say that your house doesn't work with the natural landscape and that it, isn't in context with the neighborhood and all that, because you've already done things to the land that you can't undo. And that's exactly why you want to have a bylaw like this. So,
Steve, I'm not a woman, but I have the right to change too.
right, but that's what I'm saying. You do have the right to change your mind, and if you then came to us with a 6,000 plus square foot house, what are we supposed to do? You've already cleared the lot.
You're
You've
talking
already
about
graded the
clearing a
lot.
lot, wait a minute, but there's differences. You're talking people clear cut lots or cut like a third of the lot or 25% of it to clear around trees. This
Well, it's
one-
also, we're talking about tall retaining walls.
I take
and that.
Steve's point.
That's
But
all
we
I'm trying to
depend
say.
on what
So
the
you're-
customer wants. My customer wants to decide to do an 8,000 square foot house where I never intended to do an 8,000 square foot house.
Correct.
I intended to do a 6,000 square foot house. And he will be going through the planning board, not me. I mean, he'll be paying
Correct.
for it, he'll be
That's
taking
why
his
we don't
lawyers
want
through it.
you doing anything to the site until you have a house
But I
plan.
don't know which customer I get. I'm carrying the land. It costs me money. I am selling to the first person who will do this. So whether it will be a 6,000 square foot person or a 9,000 square foot person, I don't know. I intend to do 6,000. If he comes in when I have my building permit and I already have my foundation and says I want to add another 2,000 square feet, I say fine, we go through the planning board. But I'm already there. You can't predict life. I mean, sometimes people just get pregnant, and you cannot predict life.
But sometimes there are consequences. I don't think most people appreciate what the consequences of that change are based on some recent court decisions.
But you cannot control every movement of a person on this land.
We're not
You're
trying to.
absolutely correct on that. And I want to say one thing in closing, because we do need to move on, if I may. Okay. Our job, which of course makes lots of people uncomfortable sometimes people who are uncomfortable with each other, okay? They're all uncomfortable with us, so, targets are all over on this side of the table. So, but our job is, to work with these bylaws, work with the standards and criteria that the town voted on, have been in place for a long time. And one of those has to do with minimizing changes in natural, landscape and try to get houses that work with the existing landscape. And if someone comes in and changes all that existing landscape, that makes it much more difficult to work with these standards. And it's much more expensive to try to get back to them. These are standards which were voted on by the town. They're part of our bylaws. We're charged with trying to get there in as fair a way as we can. And we often don't make people happy. The other thing that I want to say, and some of you may have heard this before, our job is not to help you as business people maximize your investment. Our job is to work with these bylaws. If that helps you, great. It's, I think that it behooves you guys to look, to work with these bylaws, look at these standards and criteria, how can we work together? Because I think that will make your property more valuable. It may not be.
I think it's too subjective.
Excuse me.
Like
Excuse me.
speed limit.
No, excuse
as
me.
fast as you
Excuse
want.
me. It may not be exactly what every customer or any customer that walks in your door wants, but as a community, you'll be building a better community that is going to fit together better and is going to be, more attractive.
No,
That's
not
what
if it
I'm
doesn't
saying.
make sense. Not if it doesn't make
One comment too many.
I think numbers are.
No, listen, I'm sorry, we've got to close it. We have to move on to the next one.
Al, are you going to continue it till?
Yeah, we'll continue it to the next
But I mean,
one.
that, not stated now, so that.
Like anything else, it's like.
I'm sorry.
But you don't see word limits that says reasonable. There's a number there.
Did you not listen? We're going to have to stop it tonight and go on to HSPD. I'm sorry. I appreciate that everybody feels emotionally about this and that you all have strong feelings about it, but we got to give the other bylaw
So when is this
amendment equal
continued?
time. Huh?
When is this continued?
To next Tuesday.
Yeah, it needs to be 7:45, but it's not election for us, it's only, it doesn't count towards that requirement.
Next Wednesday or next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday, 7:45.
November 5th.
Well, we could continue this to 7:30 in advance of the 7:45 advertising hearing.
Yeah, we could put.
The Case campus is coming in, and they wanted to come in at 7 o'clock.
Okay. We'll continue with this sometime.
Personally, thank you for taking this one first.
Are you going to bail? Are you going to go watch that game?
No, I don't want
No,
to baseball. I'm
okay.
just going to go home and have a break.
Yeah, right.
It's on Fox. Could you bring a few back?